Thank you all for joining this evening. The purpose of this webinar or session is to give you a better idea of the Creative Communities Grant, which is open at the moment and closes in 2 weeks on Friday, the 31st of January. I hope that by the end you have a much clearer idea of what the grant is and is not. And I also hope that whatever your idea is, or the work that you're doing, or the creative projects you might have in mind, that you are not discouraged. I wouldn't want you to be discouraged. So even if at the end of this process you feel that your idea is maybe not quite suitable for this one, I want to, I suppose, open a line of communication so that you feel you might know where to go next if this isn't the suitable grant. So I hope this is encouraging. I'm going to do a short sort of 10-15 minute presentation where we can just go through the grant, as I say, and explain what it's trying to do and how it works. And then I'm going to open up for your questions. So I'm going to share my screen. And by the way, if you have any questions during this, feel free to put them in the chat and we can come to them. We can come to them at the end. So I'm just going to share my screen now. Yeah. Okay. So can you see that okay? Okay. So as I said, this is a grant from Galway City Council called Creative Communities, which is currently open and closing at the end of January. So just to start, some of you might maybe perfectly aware of Creative Ireland, but for those who aren't familiar, Creative Ireland is an initiative that was established in 2017, which is about, I suppose, bringing creativity and supporting creativity and acting as a catalyst for creativity in every facet and an aspect of our society. And our lives. And that's at an individual level, that's at a community or collective level, and it's also a national program, so it's at a national level. Creativity is defined in the broadest way. So that's to include everything from coding and digital activity, crafts, through to the performing arts, and up into traditional art forms as well, painting, sculpture, music, and so on. It's purposefully broad because we understand that creativity makes different forms, and I would say that we are particularly keen to support parts, aspects of creativity that are not currently catered for or supported or served by current public cultural funding. The other thing that's important to say is some of you may be very familiar with the Arts Council or the Arts Office within Galway City Council. I would say one of the ways in which this is distinct is Creative Ireland is not ashamed, let's say, of talking about instrumentalization or how creativity can be instrumentalized. So that means what happens when you are doing something creative. What happens when you are taking part in a creative process. And there are three main benefits that Creative Ireland is interested in. One is social cohesion. What happens when you bring communities together through creative activity? The other is health and well-being, and that's both physical and mental. And we know increasingly how important creativity can be in terms of our well-being. And the third one is economic development. So looking at how creativity, I suppose, firstly within the creative industries, but not just as they currently exist, but new emerging creativities, but also how actually all economic development requires a certain kind of creativity and how we can bring creativity into that area to support economic development. So grand aims and ambitions. How does it work? Well, nationally, the priorities, priority areas or the pillars of Creative Ireland are as follows. There's creative youth, which is a strand especially directed towards children and young people and early years. In terms of our work, a sizable part of that goes into Crinnan and Og, which some of you may be familiar with, and that's a day of celebrating children and youth creativity. And this year it's on Saturday, the 7th of June. There will be separate funding available in the coming weeks for Crinnan and Og. So if you have an idea for a project involving children and young people and creativity, and the timeline matches up with a kind of showcase in June, on the 7th of June, then that might be the avenue to go down. But I'm happy to speak to you directly if you have questions on that. Creative communities is what we're here to talk about today. Creative health and well-being, I already mentioned that, but to give you an example of a project we're working on, we're working with Sail to Arts in University Hospital Galway and also Cree, as well as Galway County, to develop a project that's about saying we know that there are huge benefits for our heart health in taking part in slow art, let's say, and relaxing art and active participation. This is about saying, can we get these workshops into our hospitals, into our acute settings, and also into our communities? So what we're doing is we're piloting this through Creative Ireland funding to try and prove and show the impact. And the idea ultimately with a lot of what we do and a lot of what Creative Ireland is about is to, I suppose, try to mainstream, try to get creativity mainstreamed. We pilot things, we support experimenting, trying new ways of working, new models to try and see, can we make this part of our everyday lives, part of the norm. The fourth strand there you'll see is creative climate action and sustainability. I suppose the premise here, as with health and well-being, is that you can't separate the climate crisis from culture and from creativity. So part of the projects we support are not only about using creative approaches to impact how we feel or think or our awareness of the climate, but it's also an understanding of how creativity has to be part of finding solutions. And actually it's a practical thing about finding solutions to our problem through creative thinking and creative experiences. The fifth pillar there, creative industries. As I was mentioning before, we're one of the projects we've done is working with video game developers as part of the Wild Galway Games initiative, and working with Ardon as the main partner there. We don't have the kind of budgets that other funding bodies have in terms of economic development. So what we can do best is sort of micro and small scale initiatives that are piloting new ways of working, and working with Ardon, we work to bring video game developers together, tried workshops, and connecting them in a network with professional video game makers and companies. And so on a small scale, having a really big impact, which can then be scaled up in the longer term. And that's the kind of way we like to work. So, as I said, Creative Ireland was established in 2017, and since then we've supported over 300 initiatives. I'm not going to list all of go through all of the projects there. But what I would say is it's a huge and very wide range of the kind of initiatives that span all of those 5 pillars that you saw on the last slide. In fact, this image here is probably the most iconic image to come out of the program. You're probably familiar with this. This is Linton Afaraga, and I think really shows very clearly what we're talking about when we talk about creative climate action, because this artwork, you know, makes such an impact on our relationship and our understanding of rising sea levels in a way that perhaps a scientific paper would not do. There's a link at the bottom there that I just want to draw your attention to, and we'll share all of this, or perhaps Oana, we can put this in the chat. But this link is the Creative Ireland website, and within the Creative Ireland website, there is a different page for every local authority. And so on our local authority, you can see all of the initiatives that we've funded since 2017. So what is the Creative Communities Grant? So the Creative Communities is one of the key pillars, but of course, as you can imagine, it it includes all of the other areas. These are not siloed and separate. That they all mix together and connect together. So for creative communities, we're looking how can we support activity that has a transformative effect within communities. It's important to say that this is not about bringing culture and creativity into communities. It's about a recognition that there already is culture and creativity in every community, in all the communities, but often it's not recognized, it's not valued, and it's not supported in the same ways. So that's what we're about, is how can we support and give a platform to and celebrate and allow scaling up or higher ambitions on the culture and creativity already going on in communities. Just to give you a sense of how we develop our creative communities strand, we have open calls, which is what we're talking about today. We also have targeted projects, so that's when we're working with other partners in the council, Healthy Ireland, for example, or Biodiversity Officer or Climate Action, and we're looking at where are the gaps after we've had our open call, what's still missing, or what would be beneficial. We also apply for additional funding, and in some ways, we've even been a victim of our own success in you know, the amount of funding we've been successful in pulling down, both from Creative Ireland centrally every year in February and March. Additional funding calls are announced for specific areas of activity, but also from EU funding sources, for example. So what I would say to you is, if you have a brilliant idea for a project, and you have your eye on a separate source of funding, let's say at EU level or at a national level, but you need some support. Perhaps you need a local authority partner, or perhaps you need a letter of support. You know, come and have a conversation with us, and we're always happy to help. The last one there is the culture and creativity team. So every local authority now should have one of these. And the idea with this is that we're putting into practice the principles that we're trying to preach. And that's about us within the council trying to speak to each other, work with each other, and work in more creative ways. So for example, I mentioned before, we had a really nice project with our biodiversity officer, Paula Carney, which is called Boolia Bo Ballylochan, which is about how can we use creativity to actually engage the community around a biodiversity project involving a very cute herd of Dexter cows. So, you know, that's through art competitions, that's through going into schools and actually, you know, developing a whole program of creative activities that brings the learnings into a much more tangible and fun kind of domain. Um, so the other thing I'd say about our culture and creativity team is it's a forum where we're trying to talk to each other to find connections. So for example, if you come with a project idea, and actually we think this is more suitable for, so let's say, the nighttime economy or for climate action. We're trying to speak to each other and make sure the project finds the right part of the council to be supported. So I'm just going to give you a few examples of the kind of projects that we support. So I had a list back there, but just to give you a flavor of the kind of projects I'm talking about. Last year we supported this excellent project from An Brucher. Um, that An Brucher is a group, Irish language organization based in Menlo, that supports or represents the Gaeltacht of Galway City East. What's really nice about this project is it brings together Gaelgory in Galway City with uh, the Brazilian community in Galway through creativity. So it was an exchange and a cultural dialogue between an indigenous school of painting in Brazil and the Tory Island School of Painting. And this project was mediated entirely Oscoilga and in Portuguese. And I think it's a really good example of, where Creative Ireland fits in the funding landscape, because it's about saying, what opportunities are there to take the Irish language and make it exciting for new communities in Galway, and actually vice versa, to make the wonderful languages that are now spoken on the streets of Galway, how to create opportunities for cultural exchange and dialogue. So this project was a Beady Pocket project run by Galway Traveller Movement as part of their Mishlore Festival. And I always like to give Mishlore Festival a plug. If you're not aware of it or you haven't been, it's absolutely fantastic traveller-led arts festival in October every year, and a date on the cultural calendar in Galway City. This was a project led by Jane Ward and Nora Mongan. And I suppose it's an example of what I was saying earlier about actually trying to value and trying to support forms of creativity that are perhaps not supported as they should, or not valued, in the way that they should be, but deserve to be. And Beady Pockets are extraordinary, art form. And this project was about sharing the craft of Beady Pockets through a series of workshops, and this culminated in a public exhibition at Nuns Island as part of the festival. So always, often with our projects, we're looking at where those moments, you might have a very targeted group, but where are those moments where you can reach out and you can share the work that you've done, showcase it and celebrate it. This is a project by Amach LGBT Plus, creating Galway's Rainbow Future, that was based around a series of artworks, I suppose, decorating and bringing to life the new offices on Chalk Solas. This project, I think, is a really good example of what we mean when we're really looking for continual sort of experimentation and trialing. Creative Ireland is not really a mainstream funder in the sense that the Arts Council can be a year-on-year mainstream funder. This project in 2023, we funded Amach to do a series of art workshops. Really successful project. But one of the feedback or learnings from Amach as part of that project was that there was a kind of gap generationally caused by the pandemic in 2020, 2021. and actually they saw the value of something more intergenerational. So their proposal in 2024 was to build on the initial project by taking it in a new direction and working in an intergenerational way. And so we're always looking for that, what is new or different or experimenting or piloting. And that doesn't mean that we won't fund you 2 years in a row, but it means that, we want you to tell us, what are you doing differently this time? What are you trying that you haven't tried before? So just to give you an idea, I think it's important to give you a sense of the overall fund and the level of interest it gets. Last year, there was a total funding pot of 60,000 euro. You can see that in 2024, the number of applications received almost doubled. I would expect, given the level of interest we've already received, I would expect that we may have a doubling again in 2025 of applications. Um, we don't only fund 15 applicants each year. That is just a coincidence. It really it's down to the merits of each application. There's an external panel that comes together to assess all of the applications. You can see that even though our fund is between 2 and 10 thousand euro, generally the most often the most common amount of money funding awarded is in around the 4,000 euro mark. Um, but yeah, we would love to be able to support every project, but with the pot of money we have, we try to look at all of the criteria that are in our guidelines. We're thinking about all of the factors that I've been talking about there in terms of supporting culture and creativity, which on a basis of need, I suppose. Um, so in terms of timeline, uh, we have to wrap up our financial uh, um, returns in November for Creative Ireland. So we ask the projects are finished in October, generally around mid-October. Um, what I would say is if you have a fantastic idea for a project or an initiative that runs into November, December, just come and talk to us and flag it, and we can look at it on a case-by-case basis. You'll see a link there when we share this to the culture and creativity strategy. That's our kind of strategic document. And here in Galway City, our strategic priorities pretty well match those 5 pillars that I talked about earlier. You'll see the first one, access and cultural rights. This really should run through everything that we do. I just want to emphasize the last 3 points there, though. When we're talking about community engagement, and I'm sure in it's true in this world of the Galway City Community Network, a lot of people are very tired of these words being thrown around. Um, we really look for substantial and meaningful community involvement. So that's not something that's tokenistic, or it's not something that is not based on a real relationship or partnership. Um, you know, we will in the applications, we're always looking at what is the existing relationship with the, let's say, the artist or the arts organization or whatever it is, and the community. Obviously, that's different if it's the community group itself making the application. The second point, contribute towards a longer term impact. We're always interested in, what's next? Where's this building towards? And what we're trying to avoid, of course, is the helicoptering effect, of which I'm sure some of you are very familiar, which is funding that facilitates a sort of art activity that drops down on a community and then is gone. And there's really no follow-up, and there's no building, and there's no legacy. Um, we want you to know, we want to know from you, what are you, what are your longer term plans and how can this help you get there? Finally, this is targeted. This is a targeted fund. So when we're talking about communities specifically, we prioritize underserved communities, marginalized communities, and minoritized communities. Um, so if you look at the projects we've done, particularly in the last year, it's not an even geographic spread. In terms of place and communities of place, actually, I'd say about 60% of our projects are happening in the east side. That's based on an assessment of relative socioeconomic deprivation. That's not the only index we have. We have a more complex understanding of how these things work, but that's one of the index we're looking at. So this is targeted, and as I said, based on uh, what communities do not currently have the opportunities for cultural and creative activity. So what we fund, um, hopefully this is self-explanatory, but it really the project and event costs. I just want to emphasize the first point there, artist wages and fees. It's really important we operate on a principle or adhere to the principle of the Arts Councils and pay the artist. Um, if you come to us with an application saying, "Oh, I found an artist who's willing to do this for free," we will respond that you need to budget for the artist to be properly paid. Um, so all creatives and artists should be paid. And if you don't have an idea of what the sort of range of pay for creatives and artists, come and get in touch, and we can point you in directions of, for example, Visual Artists Ireland have a very useful um, tool on their website. The other thing, sorry, before I move on, just documenting marketing evaluation. Those last three there are worth considering. Often we find applications where they're not budgeted for, but it is really important to think, do you is there an opportunity for paying for a professional photographer or videographer to capture this? Is this a moment that would be really important to capture, or a project that would be important to capture for you as a group in order to um, uh, get where you want to go next? And is there a budget for that to resource that properly? And likewise, you may have the marketing and promotion skills within your group or organization, you may not. Finally, evaluation, always really, really important. We ask for a simple evaluation form, which I'll get to in a moment, but you may want to actually budget for some kind of evaluation or feedback. So what we don't fund, again, hopefully most of these are self-explanatory. If you have a project and you say, "Oh, we're just 5K short in this project, can I use the Creative Communities Fund to cover the gap?" That's not a very strong proposal. However, if you say, "We've got this existing project and it's really wonderful, but what we don't have is the budget to um, open out in terms of a series of workshops in a particular community setting," that could be the new aspect or new element that Creative Ireland Creative Communities Grant could add. Um, just to say, purchase of equipment, we had a question at an earlier session today. That, of course, artist materials is not regarded as equipment. That's really, we're talking about things like stages or lighting or sound system there when we use that. Um, so if you're still with me, just one or two slides on the administration. First of all, we recognize that for a grant of this size, this is not a huge grant. It's a small grant, and therefore the level of administration we require from you should be uh, 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 appropriate to the size of the grant. Therefore, we hope that we've minimized it to the essentials. If your project is successful, we issue you with a letter of acceptance, which you sign. That's called a Form A. We then transfer 50% of the grant. Just to say, if you are a small organization that can't, or if you're working with an artist, let's say, who's the lead applicant, who can't front the costs for materials and so on, it's worth considering if you can partner with a larger group or venue or organization that can front some of those costs. So some of the groups we're working with have partnered with the library, for example. Some of the groups we've been working with have partnered with, a larger group that can act as the lead applicant and front the other 50% of the costs. Once your project is complete, sometime before mid-October, we request an evaluation form. It's not 100 pages. It's about eight pages, and there's not a huge amount in it. We ask you to tell us how your event went, what the kind of response was from the participants. We ask you a little bit about to give us if there are any testimonials. And crucially, we ask for a breakdown of the budget and the evidence of that expenditure. So that second point there is probably the most time consuming, which is just to make sure that you've got all of the receipts and invoices in one place. That's vital because we cannot issue a grant for any expenditure that's not evidenced or vouched. The third point there is just some kind of public acknowledgement, and that could be a Facebook post, that could be a poster that you've printed, or some kind of publicity for your initiative. And finally, we ask for 3 high-quality images. We issue you with consent forms at the start of the project, but if you have any questions, we can go into that later. So just to give you an idea, that hopefully has given you an overview of the grant and its purposes and functions. I'm going to just show you what I mean in terms of the actual process. So if you Google Galway City Creative Ireland, should take you here. You can find that strategy document I mentioned before. We have our guidelines here, and this is where you will begin your application. I should say as well, I recognize that digital literacy can be an obstacle for many communities and many of us, so we will accept paper applications. And you can collect a paper application from City Hall, just get in touch via email. So you can see there, it should be fairly straightforward. You set up an account, and you can go back again and again by logging in to do your application over a longer time. So I'll just very, very quickly give you a sense of what this looks like. And again, if any of you or anyone you're working with has any issues or challenges or needs some support, I'm happy to sit down and go through this on a one-to-one. So these are all self-explanatory. Just to say, one of the questions is to tell us, how does this help us? How does this help to deliver these strategic priorities? How does it connect with these areas that I was mentioning earlier? You need to give us a little bit of detail about practically or concretely what's happening with your project. Are there workshops? Are there performances or concerts and so on? Obviously, dates and things can be tentative. And again, I talked about that longer term piece. So thinking longer term about how this project is contributing to a longer journey. And really then possibly the most extensive question that's going to take the most time is giving us a breakdown of your projected expenditure and your budget. So that's it. Hopefully it's 23 questions or 24 questions. We've tried to break it down and remove any extraneous questions and make it as painless as possible. But if you do have any further questions on the application, I'd be happy to help. Actually, I'll just share my last slide, which is the contact details. And I guess, Anna, we will share we'll share this with everyone as well after this presentation. But my contact details are here.